Raising the debt ceiling or the debt limit means paying the bills for stuff that Congress has already bought. And this impasse over raising the debt limit is filled with hypocrisy from both sides. First, here's the Republican House Speaker.
The only way you solve problems is you negotiate.
And here's the rebuttal from the last Republican president.
I can't imagine anybody ever even thinking of using the debt ceiling as a negotiating wedge.
The president can no longer ignore by not negotiating.
And now here's President Biden.
Happy to meet with McCarthy, but not on whether or not the debt limit gets extended. That's not negotiable.
But when he was a senator, Biden opposed raising the debt limit in 2003, and then in 2004 he missed the vote, but said he would have cast a symbolic vote against it. He opposed it in 2005 and 2006 and said because the massive accumulation of debt was unnecessary, he voted against increasing the debt limit again. So whichever party runs the White House will say you cannot tie paying our bills for prior spending to negotiations on future spending.
And raising the debt limit is usually a bipartisan undertaking, and it should be.
That's a very, very sacred thing in our country, debt ceiling. We can never play with it.
But both sides have played games with it for decades, going back to President Reagan.
Congress consistently brings the government to the edge of default before facing its responsibility.
So what's happening now is a tired old game which both parties have played from both sides. And this time it's the Democrats who say Republicans better raise that debt ceiling or else, while Republicans say Democrats better cut spending or else. And each side is betting the other side will chicken out and swerve out of the way just in time to avoid a crash. They're playing a game of chicken, and they're so brazen about it, they literally call it a game of chicken.
If they want to play a game of chicken, we'll play a game of chicken.
And if neither side swerves, they'll crash our economy by wounding our nation's credit rating and driving up interest rates even more and driving up our debt even more and likely driving mass layoffs. President Reagan, take it from there.
This brinkmanship threatens the holders of government bonds and those who rely on Social Security and veteran benefits.
The Treasury could still pay some benefits with incoming revenue, but would have to pick and choose who to pay and who to cut off. Now, Republicans are right to raise alarms about deficit spending, despite what Biden has said about reducing the deficit.
The deficit fell by $1.4 trillion, the largest one-year drop in American history, $1.4 trillion decline in the deficit.
For context, when President Biden said he's cut the deficit more than ever, he's comparing this to this, which is the binge to address the pandemic. If you take out that pandemic spending surge, or if it never happened, it would look as if the deficit is still soaring and the long-term trend is certainly still going in the wrong direction.
On my watch, things have been different. The deficit's come down both years that I've been in office. And I just signed legislation that's going to reduce it even more in the decades to come.
And while the deficit is going down compared to the anomaly of the pandemic spending, our national debt is still going up, and here's why. A deficit is how much more our government spends than it takes in each year. And even though it is smaller than it was compared to an anomaly, it's still huge. And combined with prior years of deficits, we now owe as a nation more than $31 trillion, and both parties have had a hand in this. For example, just under President Obama's 8 years in office, the national debt increased $8.6 trillion.
He doubled the debt. You take every president prior to President Obama, he then took it and doubled the debt.
And then under President Trump, the debt grew nearly double the rate of Obama, $7.8 trillion in 4 years. And after 2+ years under President Biden, the debt has grown more than $3 trillion more. Now, for context, economists say we can weigh the severity of our debt crisis by comparing our debt to our gross domestic product, or GDP. That's the total value of all the stuff that we make and do, and our national debt has surpassed it, meaning that our national debt exceeds the value of our entire economy. And now we're on a spiral on top of a spiral because the cost of borrowing and future borrowing has gone up significantly due to all the Fed's interest rate hikes. So if we don't get this under control, the CBO warns we'll face even higher interest rates and more waves of inflation. Then we could face significant spikes in taxes and job losses.
American debt is a ticking time bomb that will detonate
unless we take serious, responsible action.
So yes, House Republicans are wise to sound alarms on this, but maybe reckless in refusing to raise the debt limit if they don't get the spending cuts they want.
And I've been through a few of these debt ceiling dramas.
So he'll use his experience to lead the Senate to finding a solution?
There is no solution in the Senate.
Got it. Which means he's now leaving it to the Republican majority in the House, which lost its first week, by the way, trying to figure out who to elect as Speaker. And based on the Treasury Department's projections, Congress has until the end of this month to figure this out before we all get burned by their game of money, power, and politics.